So, Adrian, it is a pleasure to have you here today. And all these years later, right after we met, I think it was 7 or 8 years, through our friend Mike. Um, I do want to start with a question that's sort of an origin story question that I ask all my guests. And in your case, it's about your acting career. And so I'd love to know, when did you know that you wanted to be an actor?
Well, I guess there's sort of the altruistic, romantic answer, and then there's the truth, which is
I love
maybe
the
a little
truth.
bit,
We
a
want the
little bit
truth.
more, a dirtier side of the truth. Well, I've been acting for so long because I was in junior high school. I tried out for the sports team, but I didn't really vibe with the whole competitive nature of sports. I was a very sensitive boy, and I always got benched. So I started taking these after school programs, like this acting school after school, and I just really took to it really well. I mean, I loved that, I was, able to express myself, and that I, was appreciated, that it's not competitive, it's more collaborative and creative. And I was able to express the parts of me that were shy, I guess. And, and then I went to LaGuardia High School, which was the fame school. I want
Hmm.
to live forever. So I went there, and that was a very prestigious, competitive high school, public high school. So everybody wanted to go to one of those specialized high schools in New York because all the rest were subpar. And so you auditioned to get in. I did get in, and it was competitive in that there was, I don't know how many kids in the city, and then only 100 get into the theater department. So I did the theater department there. And then, the next step was, you're going to become an actor, or you're going to pursue acting. And I had a lot of agents and managers in the industry who were pursuing me even in high school. But I really wanted to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to rock out with the band. I had a band even back in high school, and
This is before the Honey Brothers?
this is before the Honey Brothers. Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
we were in. I mean, I can't tell you how many. First band I was in was called UFOs, the Unidentified Funky Organism.
That's funny.
And anyway, so in when I was making my way in the world and trying to be a filmmaker and making films and playing with a band, and distinctly not acting, that was not my passion. I was also waiting tables, and then while standing around waiting tables, just like for whatever minimum amount of money I could make at the time, I realized, I was like, I do not want to struggle too hard. And I'm like, I think I could probably make more money acting. And then I took acting more seriously, and that's when I started actually making a living. So the
Well,
the dirty part of the story is that I started acting because I could make money.
Well, I like it. And given where you ended up, which we'll get to in a minute, then I think all of the things aligned in the universe, right? You made some money so you could do the things that you really wanted to do. Let's go back a little bit in that history, because I think, one, you made a documentary early days. It was about your dad, but I want to talk about the big one. So after appearing in sort of lesser known films, and I don't mean that in any way other than your big breakthrough was with Entourage, but you were in Arresting Gina and the Adventures of Sebastian Cole, which I think was got some notoriety. You got that big break with HBO's Entourage as Vince. And looking back at that now, what was the experience like? And tell us a little bit about the good, the bad, and the in between.
Yeah, look, it's a racket. Like, you're climbing the ladder, and you have to compete for roles. You have to audition. You have to, charm people. You have to convince them to give you the job. And that was one thing I didn't like about the whole process, is that you're always waiting to be given a shot. You're waiting to be given an opportunity. The reason I liked directing is because I could always just go do it, just make it
Right.
happen. And but I was rising the ranks, and you get a little indie film, you go to Sundance, you get some acclaim, then they maybe give you a shot at a rom-com, or a teeny bopper movie, which I did, a number of those. And next thing you know, you are at a certain position where now you're being considered for an HBO show. And ironically, even when I was being considered for for Entourage, I was in Mexico trying to sneak into Cuba to make a documentary about Cuban hip hop. And I was like, I can't be bothered. Like, I'm in the middle of a film. I'll get you on the next, like I said no, essentially. And as fate would have it, my agent said, well, you find a new agent because you're too much of a pain in the ass, kid. And I listened to reason, and I said, okay, fine, fine, I'll come in. And I got the part. And, as always, my whole career was that tension between wanting to do my own thing in film and directing, music, and all my other interests, and being the guy, right? Being the and I mean, I don't know what it is, but I've always been pushed into that role, and a lot of people. I've met a lot of thirsty, hungry actors out there who have a disdain for me because there's a part of me that doesn't need it, and I think that nonchalance and that uh, that cool vibe is one of the reasons why I was able to get Vince, because that was sort of the character, full stop.
Well, it's human nature, right? And I think whether it's looking for a job or looking for a partner in life or looking for a role, people do appreciate that sort of calm, quiet confidence, not cockiness. And I think you definitely fall on that edge of that cool, quiet confidence. But when you can do that, it really does go a long way because as humans, that's what we're attracted to, right? Is someone that shows up and you just know, you feel that air about them in the room. Um, Related to that, so you and I met 7 or 8 years ago, which I mentioned up front, and we met through our friend Mike Walsh. And you had a artist that you were incubating at the time. This is back to the music side you were just referring to. Her name was Bailey, and she came and played at one of our parties, and you and I got a chance to hang out a little bit. So, has music always been a passion for you? It sounds a little bit like it has since you talked about doing it back in the high school days. And are you still working with any up and coming musicians or any plans to do that? I know farming and family is a big piece of your life right now.
Yeah, so I played music for many years. I always had some version of a music studio in my apartment, even when I was living with a bunch of guys, maybe especially when I was living with a bunch of guys. When we used to share rent, we'd like cram as many guys in the railroad apartment as we could to get the rent down. We'd allocate the biggest room for the music room, and I'd sleep in the closet, and we'd use the actual room to set up the instruments. But as I got older and I got a couple bucks, I was able to actually build a studio in my basement, and so continued to pursue and play music. And I toured the world with my band, the Honey Brothers. I was very blessed for that, and I was always independent minded, and I knew so many musicians, and I loved going to see bands and then invite them to come play or record at the studio. And it sort of just defaulted into this label, this artist run label, in which all the musicians who were pursuing a career could then support each other, and we could do showcases, we could record songs, we could put out compilations, and it was a hoot, man. It was a great time, and I've just loved working with all of them, and that ended up leading me to meet this band called The Skins, who I absolutely fell in love with, and they were a younger band. They were in their teens. The youngest was 13, and the oldest was like 17 at the time, and they were just a freaking awesome group, and I like really just fell in love with them as artists. And then they were sort of felt young and impressionable, and I kind of felt protective of them. So I approached them. I said, "Look, I'm not a manager per se, but I'd love to just support you, just so that you don't get taken advantage out there." And they agreed, and so I managed them for several years. They ended up breaking up, we had some success. I mean, Rick Rubin discovered them and signed them to American, and we were on Republic, and they had a lot of promise, as a lot of bands do, but ultimately ended up breaking up. And Bailey, who was the lead of the Skins, continued playing, and I worked with her for a couple years as well. And yeah, it was just I just there's a part of me that is um, the parental part of me that just wants to support and take care and see these kids do well, and that was fun for me as well, and especially just because I had that default uh, knowledge and experience from having been on the road and been a musician and knowing the industry and having certain opportunities that I could bring their way. It was a good time.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. And it was a fun journey. I know I helped a little bit with
You
Bailey,
did, yeah.
Bayli, on the social media and the digital front. Maya Ollie, also on the team, helped out at the time. Related to music, I have a little funny sidebar. So, in doing my prep, I watched the Like a Farmer podcast, which I'd encourage people to watch. It's kind of like one of those 10 years ago. I'm sure you never would have imagined being on it. Now you're perfectly, at home being on this podcast.
Yeah.
You mentioned you play a mean blues harmonica. This is one of your things that people didn't know about you. And I think you talked about why it was so practical when you lived back in Brooklyn. Can you just share a little bit about that? Because I thought it was kind of fascinating, and thinking about you playing blues harmonica in the subways was a cool notion.
Yeah, growing up in New York, you pound the pavement quite a lot. You're always walking from one place to the other. And then, if you had to go farther, you jump on the train. And, the train can be a little bit boring, I guess, a little bit
Hmm.
lonely at times, especially late at night. But man, do those stations have a beautiful echo. And it just resonates so wonderfully, and it's perfectly aligned for either a cappella singing or a harmonica. And so we would just carry around harmonicas in our back pocket so that if we found ourselves just alone or just with friends or hanging out, waiting for a train, we could just break them out and kill a couple minutes just harping away.
Well, I love that pragmatic aspect of it, because obviously a guitar or a keyboard are a little trickier to carry around. And as you mentioned, you can just tuck it in your back pocket. That does transition us to this next topic, which is you've done this fairly major change in your life, right? And that is in 2020, I believe, if I have my timeline correct. You moved from Brooklyn to Kintsugi Ranch, just outside of Austin, Texas. This is a pretty major, transformation in your life, and I want to lean into that a little bit. But what prompted that relocation?
Yeah, so the relocation was sort of brought on by a sort of psychic transformation, if you will. I'd been living a certain lifestyle for, I guess, since Hollywood and my 20s, teenage years and 20s, and I was getting older, and I realized that I'd been on the wrong train. I got on the wrong train, um,
Hopefully, you had your
and
harmonica either way.
well, I was probably distracted by the music, a little bit. And I realized I was getting, I wanted a family, and that parental part of me couldn't take care of bands forever, and I couldn't keep climbing the ladder of fame and fortune and self-indulgence and hedonism, and that I had to make some real changes. I was also an environmentalist for a long time, but in many ways, it was sort of lip service to uh, true true stewardship and care of the earth. It was a lot of abstract legislation or consumer behavior work versus let me really actually get to know what the earth needs and what I need by being in intimate relationship with nature. And so I made a big change in my life, and I left the city. I left New York. I left acting. I left music. I left my pursuit of being a little mini real estate mogul and like all the things that I thought I was going to be because I was so fancy and so cool and so famous and so all the things. and really pursued a much humbler, grounded in the earth lifestyle, which allowed me to invite my wife and two lovely little boys into my world. And I get to like now truly um, do environmental stewardship and really um, give forth my ability to take care and parent in the ways that I think are more healthy.
Well, two things. One, it definitely shows. I follow you along on Instagram and seeing the pictures with your wife, and I think you've posted occasional of your kids. And if I haven't, then apologies. But you definitely, I've seen pictures with your wife, and you look like you're a new man. And one of the other things I do really appreciate that on the Like a Farmer podcast, you talked about the fact that when you were young, you thought you knew it all, and then I think it happens to the best of us. You get a little bit older, you get married, you have some kids, and you realize you don't know anything, right? Your parents
Yeah,
were much smarter people than you ever gave them credit for. So I appreciate that story. I do want
yeah,
to go back a little bit because I think you yada yada over this, and it was not insignificant. And that is that you earlier days were focused on ocean conservation. And I think on the Bloomberg podcast or interview that I saw you do, you talked about just how little we know about the ocean, and we know less about the ocean than maybe even space. You started this mission called the Lonely Whale Foundation, which did some really important work. I think you did a campaign called Stop, let's see, what is it here? Stop Sucking, right?
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the origin of the lonely whale. I think there's a cool story behind that too, and what your purpose was when you were focused on that.
Yeah, look, one of my default talents is communication and storytelling. And I saw an opportunity when I heard the story of the loneliest whale in the world, which is a real whale and a mammal, the actual mammal that it swims all by itself in the ocean. And if you know anything about whales, they are highly social, like maybe
Hmm.
more social than human beings. They spend their whole lives with their families and in their pods. They never leave each other's side, and they're playful and they're very intelligent. And when you hear about this particular whale that's all alone because he sings a different frequency and no other whales sing that particular song, it just it stokes something in the human heart, and you feel empathy. You feel a sense of um, caring for this animal that it's all by itself, calling out, looking for connection. It reflects a little something about our own inner loneliness, the existential dread that we all have somewhere, lurking in ourselves. And but what it was for me is it was an opportunity to utilize that story to conjure or to cultivate empathy for something that was so abstract, so big, so vast, which was the oceans and the life there within. And so I started an ocean conservation organization, aptly named Lonely Whale, and that was the beginning of many years running that and working with the organization to bring more connection to the world's oceans and do conservation work to support its healing.
Awesome. Sorry, I lost you for 1 second, but thank you for doing that. So you mentioned earlier the move to Texas, and so I do want to lean into that. And your focus now is on regenerative agriculture. And I mentioned the Bloomberg interview. You gave some insight about being more locally focused and this whole idea of sort of decentralization in general. I think you just alluded to in your upfront answer, but talk a little bit about that sort of newer philosophy and how you felt like that could be more impactful than taking on these huge global causes where maybe you're a drop in the ocean, literally, whereas this you
Yeah,
can actually be much more in control of your own fate. So tell us more about that.
I mean, talk about the height of arrogance. I was like trying to heal the ocean, trying to fix the ocean of all things. I mean, it's such a big, vast um, challenge, and not that it wasn't a noble cause, but ultimately there's a sense of grandiosity to that effort, that pursuit, and on some level, um, I started to witness a certain arrogance in the modern environmentalism. Everybody's thinking that they need to chain themselves and do some grand gesture to, you know, protest or get on a flotilla or whatever you got to do to, like, you know, change the entire world. And great if you feel like you can actually do that. But there's a quote, you know, and I'm going to bastardize it, but when I was younger and naive, I tried to change the world. And then I got older and wise, and then I changed myself. And so I'm sort of in that place where I recognize that because I believed somehow, because I was on a hit show and I had a couple bucks, that I was uniquely qualified to fix these big problems, is sort of I think an issue with our modern culture, especially because there's so many people that have their 5 minutes of fame, or they're influencers on some level, and they all feel like they have to have a say or do something to and affect change out in the world. And it's a lot of it isn't thoughtful. It isn't done, you know, with follow through. It's when it doesn't work, you're on to the next thing. Um, and I'm kind of giving jabs at Greta Thunberg, who's like a huge environmentalist now. She's a Gaza thing, you know, like where's the follow through in your effort? And it feels unmoored, ungrounded, and ultimately ineffective. So I recognized that in myself, and I decided that I was going to really greatly reduce the scope of my effort to hyper local, and truly humble myself to learn what the earth actually needs, as opposed to taking some slogan's word for it. And I started to educate myself in permaculture and regenerative agriculture, and I put all of my eggs in one basket, so no pun intended, to actually build a regenerative farm community, which also allowed me to stay local vis-a-vis my family, so that I could be a presence in my children's lives, as opposed to being dad who's like running around trying to save the world while being absent in the home. And I think that's an important thing as well, is how do you really instill that into your children, so that they feel, you know, so that they're not robbed of their childhood, and that they can grow up to be more grounded in their thinking, and how they work and operate in the world. So yeah, you know, I'm here now, and I got to tell you, I've never been more happy and fulfilled and challenged. It's not easy. Like, forget trying to boil the ocean. Like, you know, 46 acres is a lot to take care of, and to steward, and to manage, and to create habitat for animals and wildlife, and create a dynamic system that is self-supporting without reaching for glyphosate or pesticides or herbicides or any, you know, the practices that are so readily available and encouraged in many ways. So the learning curve is big, but I'm you know, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just to watch my kids playing in the dirt and building their microbiome, and you know, their immune system in that way is one of the biggest things I'm most proud of.
I love the humility, and I actually could not agree more with that, you know, sort of building the immune system. We joked that we had to eat a peck of dirt growing up, and you'd have pets and you'd eat stuff off the ground. And so I think we've all become a little bit too fragile. And so I love the
Yep.
fact that you and your wife are encouraging your boys to get in the dirt. To that end, and you mentioned learning and sort of having this community. I believe you have this permaculture retreat coming up next week. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention that or not, but I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that. And then, is that something that's open to the public? I know you charge, because obviously there's costs that are that come along with that. But tell us a little bit more about that if you can.
Yep. Our mission is to steward the land, and to spread the knowledge and wisdom of that lifestyle, and that culture, and to invite people to come learn and be in immersion with the natural world. So we host experiences and educational opportunities for people to come be in nature in various ways, both on a recreational fun level and then also on a very grounded work level, and a community level. We're wanting people to come together and be in support of one another. So another thing that, we're so disconnected. There's a story of separation that makes us, growing up in New York, that was what it, so lonely with all those people, and something that we're unlearning. How do you actually realize that you have a place in the world, that you are home, and that you are in connection with nature, and that you are emergent from the earth. So you're always home, you always have a place. And then also humans, like, how do we learn to, lean into conflict and work through the things that scare us about being close to one another, and start to really share this experience together, as opposed to always dipping out and putting up fences and choosing to be in isolation and disconnect. I mean, there's a loneliness epidemic. There are diseases of despair in our culture, and I do believe that there's nature deficit disorder that I think we're trying to solve for, bringing people together, putting them in the natural world, teaching them the primitive natural skills of self-reliance and taking care of one another and ourselves through health and wellness, and non-digital abstract things that are just like, actual, tangible, and then immediate in the moment. And anyway, long story short, yes, it's open to the public. You can check us out at kintsugiranch.com, and we have more and more events and experiences that we are putting together for people to come enjoy.
Awesome. And I love nature deficit disorder. And you'll appreciate this. My last guest was Chuck Leavell, who's the current keyboardist for the Rolling Stones, who's literally played with everyone, the Allman Brothers, Pink Floyd. And he talked about getting out into nature. And actually, he inspired this next question I'm going to ask you, because you're a conservationist. And that is, what is one thing our listeners can start doing immediately to have a positive impact on our planet, other than going to your retreat?
Or eating a spoonful of dirt.
Or eating a spoonful of dirt. That would help as well.
Well, first of all, probably don't eat dirt, eat soil. Dirt is sort of the depleted dirt, and then the soil is the one that has all the good microbes and everything. I think take a breath, take a step back, and really find a place to ground into the earth. It was something that I had to do. I was flying high, and a lot of the technologies disconnect us from ourselves. And so if you go into nature and you put away the phone and you take off your shoes and you feel the grass and you look at, just bear witness, you start to realize that, man, you're alive, and there's so much calling you forth. And it's really just, I think the first initial impulse is to be here and be present. I'm so lucky, I guess, because I was just I was asleep at the wheel, man. I was like disconnected from myself, and I got a second lease on life, because now I'm living every day absolutely to its fullest. I go home tired, and I sleep well, because I work in my body, and I work with my hands, and we're not in our bodies, many of us. So first step is just get into your body before there's plenty to do in the garden, and you can start planting stuff and experimenting with that. And I would highly recommend growing a little something, even if it's a little tomato plant, or like just some herbs. You could grow sprouts. Just learn to cultivate and take care, because it's not only it's self-supporting, and that you're like bringing yourself back into yourself, but then you're learning how to care for the world outside yourself. You can't, you may not be able to go away for the weekend if your plants need you, right? And maybe it's going to keep you from staying out too late and sleeping over at some random person's house that you probably shouldn't.
All these life lessons. You've become a philosopher, and I really appreciate it. It's like a lot of good things to think about. So I really appreciate you sharing about that. I do want to ask one more question, sort of in this vein, and that is, you've talked a lot about this, and I can really feel it coming through. And I think some people are performative about it, like they are with their causes. But clearly, family is important. Tell us what family means to you.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, that's the hardest question for me because, how do you put it into words?
Yeah.
It's pure joy. It's pure, deep satisfaction. And when my son, he's now old enough to get out of his bed and run into and like try and come sleep with us. And when he comes up in the morning, it's like you see his face. He like sees you, and he's so happy, and there's like a good morning, and he runs into your arms, and it's just it's closeness, it's love, it's just love, man. I mean, like, I don't want to be corny about it. There's nothing to more than that. It's like how much of us, forget nature deficit disorder. Like we're craving love, right? And when you give into your family, and when you give your life in service to taking care of them, it's a reciprocal dynamic. There's a love is reciprocal.
Yeah. All we need is love, right? As the Beatles told us many years ago.
It really is true, man. I mean, let's go.
All right. This is shifting a little bit into more, I guess all these are personal, but these are the questions I try to ask all the guests. And there's just four more. We'll wrap up and then we'll be done. But any particular book, podcast, or streaming show that you are loving right now?
The one that comes to mind would be the Dark Horse podcast. Brett Weinstein
I've not
and
heard
Heather
of it.
Heying.
Tell us more about it. Yeah.
Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying, they're evolutionary biologists. Yeah, they talk about current events. They talk about different situations, different things in the current conversation sphere, but from an evolutionary scientist perspective. And they wrote an amazing book called The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, I believe. And it was really a powerful read, and I just really appreciate their perspective on, bringing things back to, simpler, more sort of tangible ways of being, things. Yeah, and they're super smart, like really articulate, and they're scientists, so they're kind of nerdy, which I like.
That's good,
and
right?
really just sensible, common sense, said in like a really dynamic, interesting way.
Well, I'll have to add it to my list. I encourage the listeners to add it to the list. I'll have it in the show notes. So thank you for sharing that. This next one, I'm really interested because you met some incredible people. I was just going back and looking at the cast of Entourage over all the years and just blown away by all the different people you had. But out of all these amazing people you've met, who has impressed you the most?
Oh man,
Please say Rob Gronkowski.
are you talking about like famous people from the industry type
It could
thing?
be anyone. It could be the president. It could be, a famous podcaster, musician, anyone in your life that people might know that you're just like, I was just blown away by this person because they were X, Y, and Z.
Well, yeah, I guess you want someone famous. The thing is, right now, my answer to that is very different, just
Well,
because.
give us a famous person than a non-famous person, because maybe the non-famous person is the person that you're most impressed with. I think we'd love to hear both.
So, well, I would say now, like the people I hang out with are farmers. My homestead mentor, Mike Tynert, who's fifth generation farmer, and that not having grown up with a father, or frankly very many healthy adult male role models, I'm now feeling nourished by the farmer community, and the way he shows up for me, the way he bequeaths his wisdom and knowledge, and it's sort of a like he needs it as much as I do. It's just such a beautiful experience, and has nothing to do with being famous or not famous, and it's just something I really craved and needed growing up in New York that I didn't think that I would ever get until I moved to Texas. So farmers and mycologists and bee stewards and people who are living the lifestyle, and those are the kinds of people that I spend my days with. And kind of hard when I go to Hollywood and I'm having conversations, because this is all I want to talk about, and it's sometimes people look at me sideways like, why you want to talk about a tractor right now? But I do. Like, I don't.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, that's really very touching, and I love the fact that you alluded to the feeling that relationship of being nurtured and needing that sort of paternal oversight, and the fact that Mike is able to give that to you. So I'm sure, hopefully, he'll get a chance to listen to this at some point, but he would be pleased that he's had such an impact. Two more questions. The next one is, what is your biggest regret?
My biggest regret. My biggest regret, and it's a soft R regret, small R regret, is that I didn't start having children earlier, because potentially I could have had more kids, and I would have had more energy to deal with them, and I would potentially have longer to live having kids. I started very late in life, so there is a mortality thing that comes up for me when you think about how much love that I have for my children, and it's like I just want to be there, and it's just who knows? Maybe if I would have started earlier, that would have set off some chain reaction that would have gotten me killed.
I was going to say it's a double-edged sword. I started earlier, not as early, but I think you're 49, and so you've got at least another 50, 60, 70 years to go. You look great. You take good care of yourself. And sometimes, I had more energy when I was younger, but I didn't necessarily have the means, or more importantly, the perspective. So, but that's a good one, and I thank you for sharing that. And then this last one.
I guess I would just say that,
yeah,
if I were to give my younger self advice, I'd say go have kids. And so to all you youngsters out there, go forth and prosper and procreate.
But just make sure you do it with the right partner, right? Because that's the other thing, is who knows, you met your wife, what, several years ago?
I think the right partner is who you choose to be in service to, and who you decide to change for, and really make work. Like this is my spiritual belief, that we are all compatible if we choose to learn the lessons that person is asking us to learn.
That's pretty profound. I actually really like that a lot. My wife and I joke about the fact that there are no soulmates, but you find that person that you care about. But I like the person that you can sort of change into the person you're meant to be. And so that's yeah, I love that. Thank you. So final question, a little bit lighter note. As someone that's a musician and has spent time around a lot of musicians, name one band or artist you wish you had seen in concert, ideally someone that's broken up or no longer with us.
Oh, man. I would say it would be Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, that's a good choice.
I'd say Jimi Hendrix, or Nina Simone. Can I say two?
Jimi Hendrix. Absolutely say Simone. You can say two. Yeah, and I like the fact that we have a man and a woman, so why not?
Yeah, one or the other. Maybe
I'll tell you a funny
playing together or something.
Yeah, or they could play together. I grew up loving Jimi Hendrix. My dad gave me the love of music, and I inherited all of his albums early days. And so Jimmy was one that I always liked. And then one of my daughters gave me a live album from San Francisco from the year, literally October 1st, I think, 1968. And I get to listen to it. And the cool thing about it was, obviously it wasn't me being there, but because it was live in concert, I get to hear him talk to the crowd, and I get to hear like and so to your point, it's a
Well,
very cool experience.
yeah, and to that point, I would say if I had a choice, I would go see the Band of Gypsies,
That would be a great one. So
which
three
I think is
excellent
only
choices.
live.
Only
Like I
live.
don't
That's
think,
right.
yeah.
Totally. Yes.
So
Well, on that note, Adrian, thank you so much for bringing your honest and humble self to the table and for sharing all that you've learned along the way. You are a true inspiration, and it's been nice to know you over the last several years. And I look forward to many, many more. So thank you so much. Actually, there's one last one that I forgot to ask you. And I know you mentioned the ranch, and we'll put that in the show notes. But if people are to follow along with you or connect with you beyond that, do you want it to be on Instagram or X, or where would you like to
Instagram's
connect?
probably the best one. So you can follow me, Adrian Grenier, or Earth Speed, which is the channel that I communicate about all the things I'm doing vis-a-vis farming and stuff. And then KintsugiRanch.com if you want to actually be a part and come join us sometime.
Well, thank you, my friend, for all of that. I really appreciate it. Great information, great energy, and look forward to continuing to follow along your successful career.
And sorry it took me so long to get this done. I appreciate your patience.
All good, my friends. Well worth it.